Every evening, millions of people tune into their local news to watch the weather forecast, completely convinced that every storm, every sudden drought, and every temperature spike is born entirely within the thin, blue bubble of our own atmosphere. We desperately cling to the comforting illusion that our planet is a closed, highly secure system, a perfectly safe fortress floating peacefully in an empty void. But this is a fundamentally dangerous, profoundly arrogant lie. Our world is not a closed bubble. It is a fragile, biological spaceship, hurtling at tens of thousands of miles per hour through a violently hostile, heavily irradiated cosmic ocean. And right now, the invisible warning lights on our planetary dashboard are flashing a bright, blinding red. The deep, ancient cosmic shields that have successfully kept our biosphere alive for billions of years are rapidly fracturing, letting the brutal, chaotic weather of deep space bleed directly into our atmosphere. If you want to uncover the terrifying truth about the cosmic forces currently tearing at the very edges of our world, please hit that subscribe button. And now, our journey into this deeply unsettling reality begins. On February 11th, 2024, the Solar Dynamics Observatory, a massive, highly advanced satellite constantly staring directly at our star, captured a deeply terrifying, entirely real photograph. It recorded an X-class solar flare, one of the most violently powerful explosions our sun can physically produce, erupting directly from a massive, dark sunspot on the solar surface. In that single, blinding flash of extreme ultraviolet light captured by the satellite's digital cameras, an amount of raw energy equivalent to millions of nuclear detonations was violently hurled out into the absolute vacuum of the solar system. This is not a theoretical computer model or an abstract scientific concept. It is a raw, terrifying photograph of a cosmic weapon firing directly at our planet. And while that specific photograph is visually stunning, it represents a profound, immediate physical threat to every single piece of modern technology we currently rely on, because the invisible planetary armor that normally protects us from these massive solar impacts is actively, rapidly breaking apart. For our entire lives, we have taken the Earth's magnetic field completely for granted. We treat it like a permanent, unbreakable wall of energy. This massive magnetic envelope, generated by a swirling ocean of superheated liquid iron, roughly 1,800 miles beneath our feet, reaches far out into the freezing vacuum of space. Its primary job is to violently deflect the relentless, deadly stream of charged particles constantly blowing off the sun, a phenomenon scientists call the solar wind. Without this magnetic deflector shield, the solar wind would aggressively strip away our ozone layer, slowly boil away our oceans, and ultimately leave the Earth looking exactly like the barren, deeply irradiated, dead surface of Mars. But this absolutely critical planetary shield is currently failing. Over the last 2 centuries, the overall strength of the Earth's magnetic field has dropped by nearly 10%, a deeply alarming rate of decay that has geophysicists highly concerned. This terrifying planetary weakness is not just an abstract mathematical drop on a scientific chart. It has created a massive, highly dangerous physical tear in our armor, a massive geographical region known to astrophysicists as the South Atlantic anomaly. Stretching across the deep, dark ocean from the eastern coast of Brazil all the way to the southern tip of Africa, this anomaly is essentially a colossal, expanding pothole in the Earth's magnetic shield. In this massive zone, the protective magnetic field is so incredibly weak that the deeply lethal, highly charged radiation of deep space penetrates dangerously close to the physical surface of the planet. It is a massive, invisible canyon where the hostile environment of the cosmos physically touches our atmosphere. The consequences of this expanding magnetic massive pothole are already profoundly disrupting our most advanced human technology. When the iconic Hubble Space Telescope, a multi-billion-dollar marvel of human engineering, physically orbits into the South Atlantic anomaly, Mission Control is forced to completely power down its highly sensitive, incredibly delicate scientific instruments. If they leave the massive digital sensors completely active while flying through the zone of intense cosmic radiation, the highly charged space particles would physically fry the internal electronics, permanently destroying the telescope. Similarly, when the massive International Space Station, carrying a highly trained human crew, silently glides through this specific geographic anomaly, the astronauts experience something deeply terrifying. Even with their eyes completely closed in the dark, they frequently report seeing sudden, bright, violently flashing lights. These unexplainable flashes are highly energized cosmic rays literally passing directly through the physical metal hull of the space station, slicing through the astronauts' skulls and physically striking their optic nerves. What deeply terrifies researchers is that the South Atlantic anomaly is not just passively sitting there, it is aggressively growing, actively spreading further westward. And recently, satellite data has confirmed that it is actually violently splitting into two completely distinct, highly problematic lobes. This rapid, chaotic fracturing of our magnetic shield strongly suggests that the massive, boiling ocean of liquid iron deep inside the Earth's core is undergoing a profoundly turbulent, entirely unpredictable transformation. We are currently witnessing a massive, planetary-scale mechanical failure. As this invisible cosmic armor continues to actively thin out and aggressively fracture, our highly complex, incredibly delicate global civilization is being systematically stripped naked and fully exposed to the absolute worst, most violent tempers of our local star. And unfortunately for humanity, our local star is currently waking up from a deep slumber with a profound, terrifying vengeance. The sun is not a constantly stable, perfectly even source of light. It is a violently boiling, highly magnetic sphere of electrically charged plasma that operates on a roughly 11-year cycle of deeply chaotic activity. During the solar minimum, the massive surface of the sun is relatively calm, completely blank, and deeply quiet. But as it aggressively accelerates toward the period known as the solar maximum, the sun's internal magnetic field becomes incredibly, violently tangled. Massive, dark sunspots, some of them physically large enough to swallow the entire Earth whole, multiple times over, violently erupt across its incredibly hot surface. Right now, we are accelerating deeply into solar cycle 25. Official, highly respected government space weather forecasters initially predicted that this specific cycle would be incredibly mild, historically weak, and deeply quiet. They were completely terrifyingly wrong. The sun is currently violently shattering all official predictions, aggressively producing a massive, unprecedented number of highly volatile solar flares and massive eruptions far beyond what the scientific models calculated. When a massive, unstable sunspot finally violently ruptures, it unleashes a terrifying cosmic event known as a coronal mass ejection. You can visualize this event as a colossal, invisible hurricane composed of billions of tons of highly charged magnetic plasma blasted directly out into the freezing vacuum of space at staggering speeds exceeding 2 million miles per hour. If the Earth happens to unfortunately be in the direct crosshairs of one of these massive, violently expanding plasma clouds, the results for our highly modern, hyper-connected society could be absolutely profoundly devastating. To fully understand the sheer, terrifying, catastrophic potential of a direct cosmic hit, we must look backward to the late summer of the year 1859, to an incredibly violent solar event known to historians and astrophysicists as the Carrington event. In early September of that year, a monstrous, entirely unprecedented solar storm squarely struck the Earth's magnetic shield. The massive influx of raw, highly charged magnetic energy was so incredibly intense that the northern lights, which are normally strictly confined to the icy, dark skies of the extreme Arctic, were brightly visible as far south as the tropical islands of Cuba, Hawaii, and the southern tip of Florida. The violent auroras were so incredibly bright that highly confused gold miners waking up in the freezing Rocky Mountains of Colorado actually began brewing their morning coffee, genuinely believing that the sun had already risen for the day. But this massive cosmic storm did not just create incredibly beautiful, terrifyingly bright lights in the night sky. The violently shifting magnetic fields aggressively interacted with the only widespread electrical technology of that specific era, which was the newly constructed, highly basic telegraph system. The massive geomagnetic storm induced massive, uncontrollable surges of raw, highly charged electrical current directly into the thousands of miles of copper telegraph wires stretched across the United States. Wooden telegraph pylons physically burst into violent flames. Highly terrified operators received severe, burning electrical shocks simply by physically touching their communication equipment. Some highly overloaded telegraph systems miraculously continue to send and receive frantic messages even after their massive, heavy battery power supplies were completely disconnected from the wall, entirely powered by the ambient, raging electrical storm violently trapped in the atmosphere. Now, tightly hold on to that terrifying historical reality and apply it to our current, highly modern civilization in the 2020s. We are a global society that is entirely addicted to, and completely, absolutely dependent upon, incredibly fragile microelectronics. A direct, unmitigated hit from a Carrington-level coronal mass ejection today would act exactly like a massive, planetary-scale electromagnetic pulse. The incredibly delicate, massive, high-voltage transformers that form the absolute, critical backbone of the North American electrical grid would be rapidly, violently overloaded by massive surges of geomagnetically induced currents. Because these massive, multi-ton transformers are entirely custom-built and incredibly difficult to quickly replace, massive, heavily populated portions of the United States could be violently plunged into a dark age for months, or potentially even several years. Without highly reliable electricity, the massive, highly industrial pumps that supply fresh, clean municipal water to major sprawling cities would instantly grind to a halt. The complex, highly digitized logistics networks that deliver food to your local grocery stores would completely, permanently crash within days. The thousands of vital communication satellites quietly orbiting in the upper atmosphere, which completely control absolutely everything from your smartphone's navigation application to massive global financial transactions, could be violently dragged completely out of orbit by the suddenly expanding, superheated atmosphere, physically burning up into useless ash upon re-entry. We are currently playing a highly dangerous, entirely foolish game of cosmic Russian roulette, blindly relying on a steadily weakening, actively fracturing planetary magnetic shield to safely protect a profoundly vulnerable, highly electrified civilization during an increasingly violent, totally unpredictable solar maximum. But the violently active sun is not the only deep space threat currently bleeding through our weakening planetary armor. While the massive solar flares capture all the highly dramatic headlines, there's a much stealthier, incredibly powerful cosmic force secretly changing the very nature of our weather from the top down. They are called galactic cosmic rays. Unlike solar radiation, which comes directly from our local star, galactic cosmic rays are incredibly high energy, subatomic particles that originate from deeply violent, unimaginable explosions happening far outside our solar system, such as massive supernovas and aggressively collapsing black holes located on the absolute opposite side of the Milky Way galaxy. These tiny, incredibly fast particles travel through the freezing vacuum of space for millions of years, moving at nearly the speed of light, before violently slamming directly into the Earth. When our global magnetic field is highly charged and incredibly strong, it acts like a massive, invisible umbrella, violently bouncing a large percentage of these highly energetic cosmic rays safely away into deep space. But as our planetary magnetic shield actively weakens, and as the South Atlantic anomaly actively widens its massive geographical footprint, a highly unprecedented, massive volume of these deeply ancient galactic particles is successfully penetrating deep into our lower atmosphere. And what these microscopic, highly energetic visitors from deep space are actually doing once they arrive is deeply unsettling, and it entirely challenges everything we thought we knew about how our daily weather is actively created. According to a highly controversial, yet deeply compelling scientific theory known as the Svensmark hypothesis, these highly charged galactic cosmic rays act as the absolute primary seeds for cloud formation on our planet. When these incredibly energetic particles violently smash into the atmospheric gases floating high above the ocean, they instantly knock electrons completely off the air molecules, creating a massive, invisible shower of highly electrically charged ions. These floating, highly charged ions act exactly like microscopic magnets, instantly attracting thousands of tiny, highly invisible water vapor molecules, aggressively clumping them together to rapidly form dense, heavy, highly reflective clouds. This means that the massive, dark storm clouds you see violently gathering on the horizon are not just the simple result of warm ocean water slowly evaporating. They are being actively physically seeded by the highly radioactive debris of exploding, dying stars located millions of light years away. It is a profoundly mind-bending, highly terrifying realization. It essentially means that our daily local weather, the massive floods that wipe out our highways, and the incredibly dense cloud cover that intensely cools our planet, is directly, physically tethered to the deeply violent, incredibly chaotic events happening in the absolute deepest, darkest corners of the cosmos. As our magnetic shield continues to actively weaken, allowing a much heavier, entirely relentless bombardment of these highly charged cosmic rays, we could be actively facing a deeply radical, completely unpredictable shift in global cloud cover, unleashing massive, highly chaotic weather patterns that our standard, highly terrestrial computer climate models simply cannot accurately predict or fully understand. While the deeply violent cosmic rays actively manipulate our massive cloud formations from the inside out, the very physical edge of our planet, the absolute boundary where the Earth permanently ends and the freezing vacuum of space actually begins, is behaving in an incredibly strange, completely counterintuitive manner. Down here on the physical surface of the Earth, we are constantly, relentlessly bombarded with endless news reports about how the dense layer of industrial greenhouse gases is actively trapping intense heat, causing the overall global temperature to steadily rise. But if you travel roughly 60 miles straight up into the highly ethereal, extremely thin layer of the upper atmosphere, scientifically known as the thermosphere, the absolute exact opposite, deeply terrifying phenomenon is currently taking place. The sky above us is literally, physically freezing and rapidly collapsing. This highly strange, deeply bizarre atmospheric anomaly is known as the thermosphere paradox. In the incredibly thin, highly sensitive upper reaches of our atmosphere, carbon dioxide does not act like a thick, heavy, heat-trapping blanket at all. Because the air molecules up there are so incredibly far apart, when carbon dioxide violently absorbs the raw, highly intense energy from the sun, it actually radiates that heat directly out into the freezing blackness of space. It functions exactly like a massive, highly efficient planetary radiator. As human civilization relentlessly pumps billions of tons of massive carbon emissions into the sky, a large portion of that gas eventually slowly floats up into the thermosphere. And as a direct result, the absolute upper edge of our protective atmosphere is actively, aggressively cooling down to deeply unprecedented, historically freezing temperatures. When massive volumes of gas rapidly cool down, they physically contract. They significantly shrink in total volume. Because of this massive, deeply unprecedented high-altitude freezing effect, the entire outer edge of our protective atmosphere is physically collapsing inward, actively pulling much closer to the physical surface of the Earth. The massive protective sky is literally physically falling. While you will never personally feel this massive atmospheric collapse while safely walking down the street, it is causing an absolute massive nightmare for the incredibly vital, multi-billion-dollar satellite industry orbiting directly above our heads. For decades, the incredibly thin air of the thermosphere has acted as a vital, entirely natural planetary garbage disposal system for our booming, highly commercialized space industry. When massive, defunct communication satellites or heavily exhausted rocket boosters finally reach the absolute end of their operational lifespan, the microscopic, highly diffuse gas molecules floating in the extreme upper atmosphere physically bump into them. Over several years, this incredibly slight aerodynamic drag slowly saps their orbital momentum, eventually pulling the massive chunks of dead, highly toxic metal down into the thicker, lower atmosphere, where they violently burn up into completely harmless ash. But because the massive thermosphere is currently aggressively freezing and rapidly shrinking closer to the Earth, this vital, highly necessary atmospheric drag is disappearing completely. This deeply terrifying atmospheric shift means that the massive, rapidly expanding cloud of highly dangerous space shrapnel constantly orbiting our vulnerable planet is no longer being naturally cleaned up. There are currently over 100 million microscopic pieces of highly jagged, incredibly lethal space debris violently hurtling around the Earth, at speeds exceeding 17,000 miles per hour. A tiny, entirely frozen fleck of peeling spacecraft paint moving at that absolutely staggering velocity possesses the exact same violent kinetic energy as a heavy bowling ball traveling at 100 miles per hour. It can instantly, violently shatter the thick, highly reinforced glass windows of the International Space Station, or completely obliterate a multi-million-dollar weather satellite in a single silent microsecond. As our protective upper atmosphere aggressively collapses, we are rapidly approaching a deeply terrifying, highly theoretical threshold known to astrophysicists as the Kessler syndrome. This is a massive, uncontrollable chain reaction where one violent orbital collision creates thousands of new pieces of high-speed shrapnel, which then violently destroy dozens of other vital satellites, instantly creating an impenetrable, highly lethal dome of flying metal, completely encapsulating our planet. We are literally physically trapping ourselves inside a massive, heavily armed cage of our own making, completely severing our highly vital, deeply necessary connection to the stars right when we desperately need it the most. While the collapsing, freezing upper atmosphere threatens to completely blind our highly advanced orbital technology, the massive, incredibly dense core of our violently shifting planet is exhibiting deeply strange, highly erratic behavior that completely baffles the brightest geological minds on Earth. For our entire highly documented human history, we have firmly based our fundamental understanding of time on the deeply stable, incredibly reliable 24-hour physical rotation of the globe. But our massive planet is not a perfectly solid, highly uniform sphere of rock. It is a profoundly dynamic, slightly bulging entity containing a highly massive, heavily sloshing liquid iron outer core and a deeply solid, incredibly dense inner core of superheated metal. And right now, for deeply mysterious, highly unknown reasons, the massive Earth is inexplicably rapidly hitting the gas pedal. On June 29th, 2022, highly sensitive, incredibly precise atomic clocks around the world recorded the absolute shortest day in completely documented human history. The massive planet completed a full, physical rotation 1.59 milliseconds faster than the standard, highly accepted 24 hours. And this was completely not an isolated, highly random freak occurrence. The year 2020 saw the 28 absolute shortest days ever recorded since highly precise atomic timekeeping actively began in the 1960s. While a tiny, microscopic fraction of a single millisecond might sound completely trivial and entirely meaningless to the average citizen drinking their morning coffee, it is an absolute, profoundly terrifying nightmare for the highly complex, totally invisible digital infrastructure that actively keeps our modern, hyper-connected world functioning. Our entire global internet, every single highly complex financial market algorithm, and the thousands of highly precise navigation satellites currently orbiting above us completely, entirely rely on perfectly synchronized, highly accurate atomic time down to the absolute microscopic nanosecond. If the physical, highly massive rotation of our speeding planet permanently falls completely out of sync with our highly calibrated atomic clocks, terrified computer scientists and highly stressed international timekeepers will be entirely forced to aggressively implement a deeply unprecedented protocol known as a negative leap second. They will literally physically have to aggressively delete a full second from the global computer clock to allow the speeding Earth to finally catch up. This incredibly drastic measure has never, ever been physically done in human history. Top software engineers are deeply, profoundly terrified that aggressively forcing a negative leap second into deeply complex global computer networks could instantly cause massive cascading software failures, potentially crashing massive, heavily encrypted data centers, violently scrambling billions of dollars in international financial transactions, and causing widespread, highly dangerous glitches in commercial aviation navigation systems. Geophysicists are desperately, aggressively trying to fully understand exactly why our massive planet is suddenly spinning faster. Some highly respected scientists strongly theorize that the massive, historically unprecedented melting of the thick polar ice caps is fundamentally physically changing the overall weight distribution of the entire planet. As billions of massive tons of highly heavy glacial ice melt into liquid water and rapidly flow away from the freezing poles toward the warm equator. It physically forces the Earth to spin faster, very much like a highly trained professional figure skater rapidly pulling their extended arms tightly to their chest to aggressively accelerate a spin on the ice. But the absolute most deeply unsettling, highly terrifying scientific theory suggests that something profoundly structural and highly energetic is fundamentally changing right now within the massive, superheated liquid iron core at the absolute dead center of our world. In early 2023, highly respected seismologists analyzing the deep, highly complex shockwaves of massive earthquakes discovered something profoundly impossible. They realized that the highly dense, perfectly solid inner core of the Earth, a massive sphere of superheated iron, roughly the exact size of the planet Pluto, had completely stopped spinning faster than the rest of the planet. In fact, the highly complex data strongly suggests that this massive, deep Earth cosmic engine might actually be slowly reversing its directional spin entirely relative to the outer mantle. We are a deeply fragile, highly digitized civilization sitting on the incredibly thin, violently cracking crust of a speeding rock, completely and utterly at the mercy of immense, deeply hidden orbital mechanics and profoundly mysterious deep Earth physics that we absolutely do not fully understand and cannot possibly begin to control. And our deeply unstable, highly chaotic planet is not dancing through the violently hostile cosmic void completely alone. For over 4 billion years, the Earth has been locked in a profoundly intimate, highly critical gravitational embrace with our massive, silent satellite, the Moon. The Moon is not just a highly romantic, softly glowing rock suspended in the night sky. It is an incredibly vital, deeply massive gravitational anchor that physically dictates the highly complex stability of our entire global climate. The massive gravitational pull of the Moon is absolutely responsible for violently churning the massive global oceans, creating the highly necessary, massive tides that actively circulate vital nutrients and heavily regulate the overall temperature of the massive oceanic conveyor belts. But far more importantly, the immense gravitational mass of the Moon physically acts as a massive, invisible cosmic gyroscope. It securely holds the physical, highly massive axis of the Earth at a profoundly stable 23.5-degree angle as we violently hurtle around the roaring, highly active sun. This deeply specific, highly stable planetary tilt is the absolute only reason we have entirely predictable, highly consistent seasonal weather patterns. It is the fundamental reason crops securely grow and massive ecosystems do not completely, violently collapse into global freezing or boiling heat every few months. But this highly vital, deeply ancient cosmic relationship is slowly, violently tearing apart, utilizing highly precise laser reflectors physically left behind on the dusty lunar surface by the highly celebrated Apollo astronauts in the 1960s and 70s. Modern astrophysicists have discovered a profoundly deeply unsettling truth. The Moon is actively, steadily abandoning us. Every single year, our massive lunar anchor is physically drifting roughly 1.5 inches further away from the Earth, slowly spiraling out into the freezing, dark vacuum of deep space. While 1.5 inches a year might initially sound entirely insignificant to a human lifespan, in the highly brutal, deeply unforgiving timeline of the cosmos, it is a highly rapid, deeply catastrophic planetary divorce. As the Moon aggressively moves further away, its highly vital gravitational grip on the Earth's bulging equator becomes significantly weaker. Without this incredibly massive, highly necessary cosmic gyroscope securely holding us completely steady, the physical axis of our spinning planet will eventually begin to wildly, violently wobble out of control. If the Earth's axis aggressively tilts too far in one highly unstable direction, the deeply frozen, highly massive ice caps of Antarctica and Greenland could be suddenly, violently exposed to direct, blinding solar radiation for months at a highly continuous time, triggering massive, apocalyptic global flooding that would entirely submerge every single coastal megacity on the entire planet. If it violently wobbles too far in the absolute opposite direction, the highly fertile, densely populated equatorial regions of the world, where billions of human beings currently securely live and actively grow their food, would be plunged into a deeply freezing, entirely unsurvivable perpetual darkness. We are actively losing our massive, highly protective cosmic partner, completely altering the fundamental orbital mechanics that have securely guaranteed our deeply fragile biological existence for billions of years. We are profoundly alone, aggressively speeding on a wildly wobbling, rapidly changing planetary vessel through a deeply hostile universe. And as our vital planetary shield aggressively weakens, our massive atmosphere radically shrinks, and our vital lunar anchor slowly slips away, we remain profoundly, entirely blind to the most violently destructive, completely immediate cosmic threat of all. We are constantly, relentlessly surrounded by millions of highly massive, incredibly dense mountains of ancient rock and frozen metal, violently hurtling through the dark solar system. These are near-Earth objects, massive, highly unpredictable asteroids, and deeply ancient comets that frequently, silently cross directly over the Earth's highly crowded orbital path. While highly advanced space agencies proudly boast about successfully tracking the absolute largest, most highly visible civilization-ending asteroids, the profoundly terrifying, completely undeniable truth is that we are entirely, utterly blind to millions of highly massive, incredibly lethal space rocks hiding completely unseen in the blinding glare of our own sun. To completely understand this profound, highly terrifying planetary vulnerability, we only have to look back to a freezing winter morning in February of 2013. Without a single microscopic warning from any highly advanced early detection system on Earth, an incredibly massive, highly dense asteroid, roughly the size of a 6-story commercial building, violently slammed into the upper atmosphere, directly over a heavily populated Russian city. Because this massive, highly destructive cosmic rock aggressively approached the Earth, completely hidden within the blinding, overpowering glare of the rising sun, every single highly advanced space telescope and completely dedicated asteroid hunter on the entire planet entirely missed it. It struck the top of the atmosphere, traveling at a profoundly staggering speed of well over 40,000 miles per hour. The immense, highly violent atmospheric friction instantly caused the massive space rock to completely detonate in midair, with the absolutely terrifying, highly catastrophic force of roughly 30 massive nuclear bombs. The incredibly bright, completely blinding flash of raw cosmic energy violently outshone the sun itself, deeply burning the retinas of highly terrified citizens simply looking out their morning windows. A split second later, a profoundly massive, completely invisible, acoustic shockwave violently slammed into the freezing city below, instantly shattering millions of thick glass windows across thousands of square miles, violently collapsing factory roofs, and sending well over 1,000 deeply terrified, bleeding people aggressively rushing to vastly overcrowded emergency hospitals. And this profoundly terrifying, highly destructive cosmic event was caused by a relatively small, completely insignificant rock in the grand, highly massive scale of the solar system. If an asteroid just slightly larger, perhaps the size of a standard football field, were to suddenly, violently strike a massive, highly populated American city like New York or Los Angeles without any prior warning, the ensuing kinetic detonation would absolutely instantly vaporize millions of human beings and completely level thousands of highly reinforced skyscrapers in a single, deeply unimaginable second. And because of our massive, deeply terrifying solar blind spots, we would not even know it was aggressively coming until the very sky itself violently exploded. The highly mysterious, completely invisible forces of the deep cosmos are not only aggressively tearing at the outer edges of our planetary shields and violently hurling massive, deeply frozen comets toward our highly fragile world, but they are also actively, profoundly penetrating straight through the absolute solid mass of the Earth itself. Deep in the highly remote, incredibly freezing wasteland of the completely isolated Antarctic continent, completely buried thousands of feet beneath the profoundly ancient, deeply thick glacial ice, lies an absolutely massive, highly advanced scientific facility known as the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. This incredibly complex, multi-billion-dollar piece of highly sensitive human engineering does not actively look up at the dark night sky to deeply study the highly distant stars. Instead, it looks straight down, completely through the massive, deeply solid core of the planet, desperately searching for the absolute most deeply mysterious, highly elusive, subatomic particles in the entire known universe. High-energy cosmic neutrinos. These completely invisible, profoundly tiny particles are violently, aggressively forged in the absolute most highly energetic, deeply destructive environments imaginable, such as the highly chaotic, violently swirling accretion disks of supermassive black holes, completely devouring entire dying galaxies billions of light years away. Because these highly elusive cosmic neutrinos possess absolutely zero electrical charge and contain almost zero physical mass, they do not interact with normal, deeply standard matter in any highly predictable, completely conventional way. They can effortlessly, entirely silently travel completely straight through millions of miles of highly solid lead, aggressively passing completely through deeply massive stars and entirely solid planets without ever being slightly slowed down or physically deflected. Trillions of these profoundly ancient, highly energetic cosmic ghost particles are actively, entirely silently shooting straight through your physical body, completely penetrating your highly complex brain and deeply delicate DNA every single second of absolutely every single day, and you can absolutely never physically feel them. But the profoundly terrifying, highly unsettling scientific question that keeps the absolutely most brilliant, deeply respected theoretical physicists aggressively awake at night is entirely focused on the incredibly rare, highly violent moment when one of these completely invisible cosmic bullets does actually physically collide with a highly dense atomic nucleus deep within the profoundly massive, superheated liquid iron core of our highly unstable planet. When a highly energetic cosmic neutrino violently, aggressively strikes an atom deep inside the Earth, it instantly triggers a completely microscopic, profoundly violent subatomic explosion, aggressively releasing a tiny, highly concentrated flash of completely pure, deeply intense kinetic energy. While a single, highly isolated, microscopic collision is entirely meaningless on a massive planetary scale, the deeply terrifying, highly mathematically probable reality is that the deeply massive Earth is constantly relentlessly absorbing absolutely trillions upon trillions of these highly violent, deeply energetic subatomic impacts completely deep within its highly sensitive, entirely hidden internal architecture every single year. Many highly concerned, profoundly forward-thinking planetary geophysicists are aggressively beginning to deeply wonder if this entirely silent, deeply massive, highly constant cosmic bombardment is subtly, violently adding profoundly immense, highly unpredictable amounts of completely hidden thermal energy directly to the deeply unstable, highly pressurized magma chambers, an entirely massive liquid iron core completely churning beneath our feet. Are the profoundly terrifying, entirely unexplainable, massive spikes in global volcanic activity, the deeply alarming, highly chaotic acceleration of the rapidly shifting magnetic poles, and the violently sudden, deeply unprecedented acceleration of the entire physical rotation of the Earth, completely, entirely directly connected to a profoundly massive, entirely unseen influx of highly destructive, deeply ancient cosmic energy aggressively firing from completely dying, violently collapsing galaxies located completely at the absolute furthest edge of the deeply observable universe? We are utterly, completely blind to the highly massive, entirely invisible cosmic machinery that is aggressively, completely silently, violently operating the deeply hidden internal mechanics of our profoundly fragile, highly, completely doomed world. Every single deeply terrifying, completely unprecedented anomaly we have aggressively, meticulously examined today, from the profoundly violent, highly expanding radioactive tear in our vital magnetic shield, to the violently shrinking, rapidly freezing upper atmosphere, the deeply aggressive awakening of our highly volatile, deeply angry local star, the completely unseen, highly lethal gamma-ray sniper rifles hiding in the freezing dark, and the profoundly silent, deeply massive subatomic bombardment actively penetrating the absolute solid core of our highly unstable planet, strongly, absolutely points to one deeply terrifying, completely unavoidable, profoundly horrifying conclusion. Our deeply massive, highly entirely beautiful blue planet is absolutely not a highly secure, completely isolated, profoundly safe haven, floating peacefully in a deeply quiet, highly empty void. We are completely, entirely physically tethered to the incredibly violent, highly chaotic, deeply destructive mechanics of a profoundly massive, actively hostile universe. The comforting, deeply ingrained human illusion of complete planetary stability has been entirely, violently, and permanently shattered. We are aggressively, rapidly entering a profoundly new, deeply terrifying, completely highly unpredictable era of massive cosmic and planetary transformation. The deeply ancient, highly vital protective systems that have completely securely allowed human civilization to blindly, deeply ignorantly flourish for thousands of years are violently, actively failing right in front of our completely oblivious, highly distracted eyes. We desperately, urgently need to completely stop intensely looking exclusively down at our deeply fragile, highly vulnerable terrestrial problems and aggressively, actively start looking deeply up into the violently shifting, profoundly hostile cosmic ocean that entirely surrounds our deeply massive, entirely fragile sinking ship. Thank you incredibly much for bravely joining us on this deeply terrifying, highly profound, completely eye-opening journey into the entirely hidden, violently chaotic cosmic realities of our deeply strange, highly changing Earth. If you found this profoundly massive, highly terrifying cosmic perspective absolutely fascinating and completely deeply unsettling, please powerfully hit that subscribe button right now so you absolutely never miss another deeply important, highly urgent exploration into the completely terrifying unknown. The profound realization that our world is actively reacting to the vast, violently chaotic ecosystem of the Milky Way galaxy does not have to be a message of absolute, paralyzing despair. While the planetary magnetic shield actively weakens and the sun relentlessly continues its aggressive, highly volatile awakening, human beings possess one incredible, deeply ancient survival mechanism of our own, which is our boundless, profoundly tested capacity for rapid adaptation. We are the direct descendants of deeply resilient, highly resourceful ancient survivors who successfully navigated brutal, planet-freezing ice ages and catastrophic, sun-blocking volcanic winters with absolutely nothing more than sharpened stone tools and raw, unyielding determination. Today, we currently possess the highly advanced, deeply complex scientific knowledge to actively monitor these terrifying cosmic shifts in real time, and we possess the brilliant, massive engineering capacity to fundamentally harden our deeply vulnerable, highly critical electrical grids against the absolutely inevitable, massively destructive solar storms. But to successfully survive this rapidly approaching, profoundly terrifying era of planetary and cosmic turbulence, we must completely, entirely shed our comforting, deeply dangerous ignorance. We must deeply, fundamentally understand that we are absolutely not the arrogant masters of a perfectly stable, permanently safe terrestrial terrarium, but rather the highly vulnerable, deeply interconnected passengers of the incredibly tiny biological spaceship actively navigating a profoundly dangerous, violently unforgiving cosmic ocean. We must urgently, immediately stop endlessly fighting amongst ourselves over deeply trivial, incredibly small terrestrial borders and urgently unite our massive global scientific resources to securely, actively protect our entire, highly fragile civilization from the violent, unyielding forces of the deep cosmos. This is the absolute greatest, most profoundly terrifying existential test humanity has ever actively faced in our entire documented history. We will either boldly, aggressively rise to successfully meet the profound, highly massive challenges of this changing, highly chaotic universe together, or we will silently, inevitably perish in the freezing dark, becoming just another completely forgotten, completely failed biological experiment entirely swallowed by the immense, violently uncaring void. Thank you incredibly much for bravely exploring this deeply unsettling, profoundly massive cosmic reality with us today. If this massive, highly detailed investigation entirely shifted your personal perspective on our profoundly fragile, highly temporary place in the dark universe, please make absolutely sure to completely smash that like button and actively, immediately subscribe to the channel for more deeply terrifying, highly scientific journeys into the great, completely unknown void. I highly encourage you to immediately scroll down and leave a comment below to passionately share your own thoughts. Have you personally noticed any deeply strange, completely unexplainable weather anomalies, bizarre, brightly colored atmospheric events, or profoundly chaotic natural shifts in your own local area recently? Do you genuinely, honestly believe our modern, highly electrified civilization is completely prepared to survive a massive, Carrington-level solar event tomorrow? We deeply want to actively read your entirely honest, completely unfiltered opinions down in the comments section. Stay profoundly vigilant, relentlessly keep your eyes focused squarely on the violently changing skies above you, and always deeply remember that in this massively vast, profoundly dangerous universe, absolutely nothing is ever truly permanent. We will see you in the very next video.